Don't risk this going into a deposition. I'm gonna show you what that is in this video. And if you watch until the end, I'll teach you 3 things that can help you to screen whether or not a person needs an interpreter, the opponent needs an interpreter, even if they say no, they don't need one. Because we've all ran into people who said that they don't need an interpreter and they actually need one, right? So first, let me start by telling you this story. It's about a dep that I actually just finished. Before the dep started, I was speaking with the attorney, and the attorney was explaining that about a month ago, they held the same deposition, meaning with the same witness, and it lasted all day. It was like a 7-hour dep. However, they're doing it again. Why? Because at that time, there were too many communication issues. For example, and I took notes, so I'm going to read my notes. It was hard to understand the deponent because of their accent. Now, keep in mind that the deponent has been living in the United States, older than me, living in the States for 30, 40 years, longer than I've been alive, and has worked a professional job, speaks English well. But the accent was just too thick. And on top of that, there were situations where maybe the attorney would ask a question and then the deponent would answer a different question or act as if they understood the question in a different way. You know what I'm talking about, right? Let's say, for example, and this actually happened, the attorney asks, "Is this your handwriting?" looking at a page. And then the deponent looks and starts to actually read the page. So it's clear that the opponent understood the question differently. Maybe, "Is this handwriting of yours? Could you please read it to me?" Something like that. Whatever the case, moral of the story, don't risk going into a deposition without an interpreter. If you think you need one, get one. Don't risk it, because you might have to come back a month or a couple of months or a couple of weeks later to re-spend all that energy, that money, and that time. Now, how do you determine whether or not you will need an interpreter? I'm going to give you 3 different tips on how to screen whether or not you need an interpreter, even if your opponent says, "No, I don't need one." Now, first thing, what is their first language? Is their first language English, or is their first language Korean, or is their first language Spanish, or something else? If the first language is not English, then you might want to consider getting an interpreter. Check, speak with them. Another thing, ask if they've had an interpreter in the past. Even if they haven't been deposed before, you can ask if they've had an interpreter for an event, or going to immigration, or meeting with another attorney, or some kind of meeting. Whatever the case, have they had an interpreter in the past? That is a sign that they would need an interpreter again. And the third and last thing, ask yourself this question: how well do they speak English? If your answer is good enough, or they understand it good, that's a red flag. If you find yourself, when you're speaking with the person, kind of avoiding certain words or speaking more slowly to them than you would any other person, then you might want to consider getting an interpreter. Now, if you ask yourself the same question and your answer is, "Oh, man, they're perfect, they're fluent, they speak better than I do," then you might not need an interpreter. All right, so there you have it. Don't risk this going into a dep, and 3 tips to help you screen whether or not you need an interpreter, even if the opponent says they don't need one. That's it.